Hi, folks. My name is Girish, Bali, the host for Back to Basics, another Back to Basics for another week. Today, I have a returning champion guest of me. He came on season 1, and we talked about the mystery book that he released last year. And now he's going to be releasing another one this year. Amazing person. And now we're just, cold hard friends, and we're just chit-chatting like, what did you do last night? What are you going to do tomorrow? I mean, those are the topics that we are talking about. But today we're going to talk about Cold Fear. Yes, guys, Cold Fear. Cold Fear is a murder mystery book, and we're going to talk about the details of why is there mystery and murder in the cold. So I think we're going to talk about that. So John, how are you? And thanks for returning back to Basics here.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much. As you said, we're going back to basics. New book. We got to start at the beginning here.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you again. So before we get to the Cold Fear, has your answer changed? I'm going to ask you this question again. What does Back to Basic mean to you today?
I don't think it's changed, but I'll add to it because I think I talked last time about big picture, and you happen to catch me at a moment where Cold Fear is about to come out. It's coming out in June, and it's March, which must mean it's writing season because it's time to start the next book. It comes after Cold Fear. It won't come out for a year, but got to start writing it now.
Sure.
So you caught me right at the moment where I'm starting a new book, and every time, I've published over 30 books, and you'd think that I'd kind of have the hang of it by now, and in one sense I do, but honestly, every time I start a new book, it's like, how does this work? Where are we? What do we do? Neil Gaiman once said, and I can't remember the name of the writer he was citing, but a writer he admired very much, he was talking with one day, and Neil said, I think he was working on American Gods, his massive adult novel, and he said, I think I figured out, I've really worked out how to write a novel. And his friend said, oh, Neil, you never learn how to write a novel. You only learn how to write the novel you're writing. And I love that because it's kind of like you never really learn how to live the day you're living. You never really learn how to live. You learn how to live the day you're living. I mean, you learn how to do what you're doing right now. So starting a new book for me, it is a question of where do I start?
Sure.
Who is this character? I'm writing about the recurring character of Finn, whom I'm sure we'll talk about today.
Yes.
This is going to be the third Finn book, Cold Fear being the second. But it's like all over again. Now, who is this character? What makes him tick? What's real for him? What's his pain? What's his dream? And the characters around him and the story around him. It's kind of like starting very back at the beginning. And I love that. I think that if you lose that, then you lose a piece of your soul. I think that the Zen Buddhists call it beginner's mind, right? I think it's so important to come at things, even things you've been involved with for a while, especially things you've been involved with for a while, to come at them fresh, come at them as if they're brand new. Your marriage, your relationship, to come at it as if it's brand new every day. Your life, every day in your life is the blank page of a book you're writing. That for me is Back to Basics. It's starting with that fresh, blank slate mind that says, let me re-examine all my assumptions, kind of take it back to the very beginning and say, what am I doing here?
Yeah. So John, thank you again for answering that. On a spin-off of what you said on season 1, and now is just season 2. So thank you again for that. Before we get into the Cold Fear, I just want to congratulate you and your wife on the book that you guys created, The Go-Giver Marriage, and it's great what you guys have done. I want to get the copy of that whenever I get a chance, and it'll be great to have that in my bookshelf. As you see here, I have this bookshelf here at the back with
see that,
and all the people signed and everything.
These are the Go-Giver books.
Nice.
And so this is the first one I've written with my wife, which was really, really has been wonderful for us.
Yeah, awesome, awesome. Congratulations, by the way, John.
Thank
Uh,
you.
so I'm going to ask you this really funny question. So, Cold Fear is coming in June. Is that like an oxymoron that you are talking about winter in summer?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, but you know, when you go to the beach, you want to bring a cold drink, right? A
Right.
chest of ice in your Coke or whatever. So maybe this will work out. Hopefully, this will work out. It's interesting. That is a funny question, but there's something behind it too, because one of the things that happened in Steel Fear. Okay, so the original book, Steel Fear, as you know, and as your audience knows, took place on an aircraft carrier. The
Mm.
entire book took place on an aircraft carrier, which is such a strange foreign environment. I mean, if you haven't been on an aircraft carrier, haven't spent time there, it's hard to imagine. It's like being in space.
Yeah.
So after Steel Fear, back to basics questions. Time to do book 2. Where do we go? I mean,
Hmm.
you've done an aircraft carrier. Now, what do you do? Book 2 on a submarine, on an
Yeah.
ocean liner, on an airplane, and a rocket ship, on a train. What's the environment? Because having done it the first time, we really wanted to create another experience. It was in a strange foreign environment.
And I
Iceland. So we came up with Iceland. So that was the idea, that we'd go to Iceland, where
oh,
Iceland, in fact, at Christmas time, where it is cold. So yeah, summer read, Christmas in Iceland.
summer. Yeah. So it's an oxymoron thing.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So
Counterintuitive.
while you were speaking, I was just looking as when that other episode that we released, and I wanted to tell everybody that it was episode 130, season
Ah,
one, and you can listen to that about Steel Fear, and then you should listen to this,
yeah,
and tell me how you thought about the Steel Fear, and then
that's the
definitely
book.
the Cold Fear, which is coming in June.
Right.
So why are all murders during wintertime? Can you just explain that to me? Is it because it's more, what is it, cold? Or is it fear?
I mean, there is something sort of claustrophobic about cold, because in the cold, first of all, when it's hot out, even when it's really hot, if you go outside, you're not going to cook literally to death.
Right.
But when it's really cold out, you spend a day out in the cold, you can die of exposure. There's
Hmm.
something life threatening about the cold. There's something terrifying about the cold, and there's also something about the cold that makes us want to retreat and get inside and kind of close up. So you get
Hmm.
that claustrophobic sense, which
Hmm.
is perfect for murder mysteries. Now that said, there's
Hmm.
plenty of the Dave Robichaux books by I'm spacing out on the James Lee Burke. James Lee Burke,
James
the
LeBerg. Okay. Yeah.
wonderful, one of the great men of American letters, the crime novelist from Louisiana. So a lot of his novels take place in Louisiana, where it gets sultry hot. So there's, I think of that great Rod Steiger, Sidney Poitier movie, In the Heat of the Night, right? There's great stories about murder and death that take place in the sultry heat. But cold is a great mystery environment, because there's something terrifying gripping at your veins.
Is it because it's easier, or is it more detailed when it comes to the cold? Does that make sense? Like, for example, if there's sleet, snow, wind, I think from a storyline, from a writer's point of view, I think it's more attractive versus summer. Or is that wrong?
I think it's more attractive versus a calm, lovely summer day. But August, where I right now I'm in Florida. If you look at our last interview, of course, I was in Massachusetts when you interviewed me before, I think. Now I'm in Florida right now. If you're talking about a lovely March Florida day, or even a lovely June Florida day, that's not very threatening. But August down here is hurricane season. So give me a summer hurricane. That could be fun to write about. The thing that's great about cold is the weather, is the personality, is the character, the sleet, the snow, the freeze, the hazards of the ice, falling through the ice. There's a scene in Cold Fear where the hero Finn and the person that he's wrestling with actually plunge through the ice, and now you're submerged in hypothermia land. So yeah, It's wonderful to write about. It's always wonderful to try to write about simple environments and bring it to life. One of the things I learned in this new field for me, I mean, I've been writing for decades, but I'm new to the novel sphere, right? In a parable like The Go-Giver, you never even know what season it is. There's no description of weather. I mean, it just doesn't really come into it much. In a novel, the weather, the season, the environment, they become a character. I mean, in Steel Fear, the ship, the steel ship of the ocean, of the the aircraft carrier, was like a character. It was like a third character in the movie. You got the hero, you got the killer, you got that ship, which was like a monster and a hero and everything all rolled into one. Well, the weather's like that. Weather is so much fun to describe, and it's such a great way to bring atmosphere and color and character and meaning to a book. A lot of stories happen where you feel a storm coming through the first 2/3, 3/4 of the book, and then at the end the storm finally breaks, and it's the storm is taking the role of scenery and a stage play, or set props. So yeah, it's fun.
I mean, most of the movies that we've seen, they have shown, let's say, what is that movie called? Tomorrow's Day or something like that, I think.
Oh yeah, Day After Tomorrow.
Day After Tomorrow, right? I mean, a great screenplay, right? So, do you imagine yourself for Cold Fear to be a movie? I mean, we talked about the Steel Fear to be a movie also, or maybe a TV show. What are your thoughts on that part for the Cold Fear?
I write these novels so that they could, my intention anyway, is to write them so that they could easily translate into the structure of a movie. At the same time, they're really dense. There are a lot of characters. There's a lot of transformation. There's a lot of subplot. There's a lot going on. It's a thick, dense novel. I like my novels to be, like rich, complicated meals. I don't want them to be like, a piece of toast. So then
it wouldn't be a movie. It would be a TV show then.
Yeah, it could be a movie, but I think the guy who is producing Steel Fear, the TV show, which is not in production yet, but it's in process. When he first bought the rights to the book, he said, "I'd rather make this into a TV show than a movie because it's a bigger canvas. We got more time for the characters to stretch out." So I think Cold Fear, it could be a movie, but I think it would do better. It would get a better opportunity to express itself as a limited series, maybe an 8, 9, 10-part series, something like that.
So John, thank you again for explaining that, and hopefully we'll talk about the TV show about the Steel Fear later in the future, if yes, that's the case, and if you do come back here. So let me ask you this: for writers, okay, I just want to talk to writers for a second here. Is there a different style when it comes to movie writing versus a book writing? Is there a difference?
Oh, if you're actually writing a screenplay, you mean?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, world of difference. I mean, it's almost like two different languages. It's like writing in English and writing in, I don't know, Japanese, Chinese, Swahili, Greek, something. Screenwriting is a very, very different language because the audience is not going to read the screenplay. When you write a novel, the audience is going to read it. In fact, that's all the audience has for your book, for your novel, is the words on the page. So the words give them everything. So you describe the scenery, you describe the characters' thoughts, you describe the texture and the feel of their clothing, you describe it all, because that's the only thing the audience has. The screenplay is the opposite. The audience never reads the words. The only words in the screenplay that the audience is actually going to ever get are the spoken dialogue. Visual. Well, the spoken dialogue, So, but the visuals are all, the director is going to create that with their set producer and their set designer and prop designer and costume designer, and of course then they get the actors. It's going to be painted on the screen. So the screenplay is only a set of instructions for the director is what it is, which means that It's a totally different style of writing. It's very telegraphic. It's very
Mm,
sparse. You
mm,
say things in the fewest words possible. This is also true of dialogue. I'm not talking about the exceptions like David Mann, Glengarry Glen Ross,
mm,
or Aaron Sorkin, who's famous for his long, florid lines of dialogue. Those
mm.
are the exceptions. Normality in screenwriting, and I'm really glad you asked this question because it means a lot to me. Normality in screenwriting is the dialogue is very terse. It's
Mm.
very sharp. That's why famous quoted lines from movies are typically a couple of words long.
That's right.
That's it. Um, the reason I'm going into this is that, aside from the fact that you asked the question, I think it's one of the most valuable things a writer can do. A writer
Mm,
of novels, books, writer of nonfiction, and writer of blogs, any kind of writer would be well served by studying screenplays, because what
mm,
you learn from a master screenwriter is the power of economy, the
mm,
power of brevity. And I think we may have talked about this, Girish, on the last podcast, but when I first turned in Steel Fear, the manuscript was
mm.
over 150,000 words.
Right.
Our agent said, this is great, and it's got to be cut down to 100,000 words.
Mm.
And Brandon and I were like, what? What? Which 50,000 words do you want us to take out? Should we just take out all the consonants?
Mm.
But she was absolutely right. And one of my teachers, a wonderful writer named Harry Bingham, who has a writers community in the UK that I belong to, and who's a fantastic teacher as well as fantastic mystery writer. Harry talks about the goal of trimming a finished piece of writing. He said, you take out words, but don't take out content.
Mm.
Take out words without taking out content. And what that means is you take out superfluous words, unnecessary words. You find something you've said with 8 words and find a way to say it in 4 or 3 or 5. Find something that takes a paragraph, say it in 2 sentences. I've never met a piece of writing, with the possible exception of haiku, that couldn't be improved by being made shorter. So even for something florid like a novel, screenwriters will really show you the path. They will really refine your skills. I recommend that for copywriters in marketing. Screenwriters are masters, and vice versa. Screenwriters should study good marketers too.
But John, I'm going to ask you this question, and it sounds like an oxymoron question. Okay, now here's that word again. It seems
Yeah.
like. So
Yeah.
let me ask you this, right? Because writers, they want to write and express. But the way you explained it is that you're minimizing your 8 words into 4 words, which is less description of what that is. Do you think
Yes.
less words are better to describe versus extra? What are your thoughts on that?
I'll say this, you can more easily ruin a passage with too many words than with too few. Now, that doesn't mean, and it's a good question you're asking, because let's not get simplistic about this. It's not a simple matter of mathematics, like 5 is better than 7, 4 is better than 10. No.
Right.
So, one of the things that I teach and that I practice is, and I teach it because I practice it. When you're first writing, when you write a rough draft, when you're in the first throes of writing, put it all on the page. Like you said, express yourself, do it. I tend to say the same thing 3 times. I'll repeat myself. I'll do it over and over again. You see, I just did it. I'll say things 3 times. I'll repeat myself. I'll do it over and over. It's 3 ways of saying the same thing. I do that when I write. I'll describe things with three adjectives. I'll say that somebody did something, and I'll describe the action three different ways. And that's rarely survives to the final draft, because usually what's happening is I'm kind of stretching my wings. I'm trying things out. I'm putting all the words in the page. But really, of the 3 adjectives that I used, one of them is going to be the one that really gets the point across. My mother taught me something when I was a little boy. She said, when you're making an excuse, she said, only offer one excuse. Don't say, well, the bus was late and I overslept and the dog ate my homework. Because now nobody will believe you. That's right. Just tell them one thing. The bus was late. Sorry. And so that I have held that principle into my adulthood. When you're going to make an excuse, when you're going to make up an excuse,
The
just
reason,
make up one. It
you
also
know,
works in novel writing.
yeah. You know, the reason why I asked this question about the manual script and and their screenplay and all that,
Screenplay.
because there was a you know, the manuscript that you sent it to me, and I was reading it, and there were less words to explain. So I think I understand now from the point of what you are telling me. So that's why I had to ask that question, because I think the book tells you more descriptive versus you know, a screenplay, a manuscript. So
Yeah.
yeah, so thank you again for explaining that. Now, does Cold Fear, is it a sequel, or is it something separate, or are we just taking one character, put it into the next book, and just go on?
Yeah. It's something like this. If you imagine a TV show where, and I'm not going to use a specific example, but where every episode, right? Every Wednesday night or whatever it is, a little drama happens and gets resolved at the end of the half hour or the hour. But at the same time, the main characters in the series, in the TV show,
Hmm.
have a larger story that won't resolve to the end of the season,
Till the end of the season,
right? So
right?
you have short stories that resolve in an hour, but you also have longer stories that don't resolve until the end of the season. That's kind of what this is. So it is a sequel. There is, in Steel Fear, you'll recall, there was a serial killer.
Hmm.
People were getting killed on this
Right.
aircraft carrier. By the end of the book, by the end of the book, by the end of the book, you find out who the serial killer is. The killer's, he's stopped. The murders stop happening. That story is tied up. But Finn has a larger arc. He has a larger story that has to do with what happened to him last summer in Yemen. What happened to him as a kid? What happened to his parents? What happened to his best friend Kennedy, who was murdered? And so in the second book, Cold Fear, there's a young woman. I'm not going to give anything away to say this because it
Of
happens
course not.
in the first chapter. It happens in the prologue. A
Yeah.
young woman running through the streets of Reykjavik in Iceland in the middle of winter, right after Christmas, or actually on Christmas Eve, running through the streets, slips herself into a pond and drowns.
Hmm.
And the question is why? What's going on? By the end of the book, you know why. By the very end of the book, you know why. What happened? What's going on here? But at the same time, Finn's larger story, Yemen, Kennedy, his childhood, his parents, this whole backstory, it goes further in Cold Fear, and it's not resolved either in Cold Fear. It'll continue to the next book and the next book and the next book. I am imagining about, at this point, about 7 books in, will really finally, Finn will go back into that closet from his childhood. But I don't know that for a fact. It could be 6 books, could be 10. We're not. I'm not really sure.
Yeah,
Jack Reacher, Lee Child, when he originally started the Jack Reacher series, he planned that by book 24, Jack Reacher would die. That was his plan. He says, at the end of maybe 2 dozen copies. Was it 20 or 2 dozen? I think it was 2 dozen. He says he'll die. But plans changed along the way. He decided that he became such a part of so many people's lives that he finally got to a point where he said, I can't kill him off. So
yeah. You know, the character of your book kind of reminds me of the character Jack Bauer from 24. You know, he's very close to dying, but he doesn't die, and he just keeps on going.
Yeah. That's
So
interesting.
it's like that thought process, and I read the book, and I read a couple of chapters. So I'm not gonna tell anybody anything till you release it. So how about that? So thank you again for that. But John, let me ask you this before you leave today. Are you glad that you wrote this book, and are you excited, or are you nervous because you're gonna wait for that review?
I won't lie about it. It's always you always have expectations about how the world will receive your book. And the moment those expectations are in any way dashed or in any way compromised, you get 49 fantastic 5-star reviews, and then the 50th person says this thing was terrible, and it hurts. It can't not hurt. But first thing I'm going to say is Steel Fear was really well received. Cold Fear is already being really well received. Steel Fear was just nominated for a Barry Award, which is very exciting. Barry Award is kind of like, I don't know, a Golden Globe or something for
Right.
in the crime novel world. So that's been incredibly gratifying. Cold Fear, we just got a beautiful endorsement from Jeffrey Deaver, who's just a household name crime novelist. And so I'm sure we'll get nice reviews, but as a writer, that has to be secondary. The primary thing is it has to satisfy you. Has to satisfy you, my dog. And I am so glad I wrote it, to answer your question. I'm loving the story of Finn, and I got to write the third book and the fourth book and the fifth book because I want to find out what happens. I want to know where this guy goes. He's become part of my life, and I genuinely care about him and his friend Carol and what's going to happen with him and how is he going to find out what happened in that closet when he was a kid. So it's part of my life.
I'm going to ask this one question before you leave, is all these actions that you do and the murders that you do, you wanted to be an action hero, didn't you?
When I was a kid, I wanted to be a superhero. I wanted to be Batman.
Yeah.
Batman was like my guy.
Yeah.
And I, as an adult, I still want to do that. But what I've found is the way that works for who I am and for my personality and my makeup and my style. And it's not, Brandon, my co-author in the Finn X books, he was an action hero. I mean, he was a Navy SEAL. It doesn't get more action hero than that. The way that I am a superhero or an action hero is touching people through words, is touching people's lives through the books. I've said a lot in the last year about Steel Fear and the leadership lessons couched in the book, and and some of the life lessons that I didn't set out to say, well, how can I teach this lesson through this book? You just write the story, but you find that pieces of yourself come out of the story. So there were leadership lessons in Steel Fear. In Cold Fear, Cold Fear is about friendship and loyalty and betrayal, but especially about friendship and about what that means and how that happens and what its implications are. And if that lifts one person or touches one person's life in a positive way, then hooray. I want to say this. This is a pure historical happenstance because we didn't know back a year plus ago when we started writing Cold Fear what would be happening in the world today. But next to Finn, there's a hero in the book who is a Ukrainian woman who is this sister of the girl who drowned, actually. And she becomes a real hero in the story. And there is an unseen, not unnamed, there is an unseen Russian character who is a pretty evil, manipulative character. And we had no idea that this drama of Russia and Ukraine would be playing out in the world today the way that it is. But I'm really in love with it. I just love this Ukrainian woman. Oksana is her name, and Oksana is a hero for the book, and she's a hero for our times. So I'm honored to have been part of breathing life into her.
Awesome. John, thank you again. And before you leave, how was your trip on Back to Basics? And any last words to all my listeners and my viewers? And then after all the stuff that you're done, you're on Back to Basics again, second time. So how do you feel?
It feels like coming home. I have no question that we'll be doing this again for book 3. I look forward to it. And I love the orientation of it because if you don't continually, constantly, periodically ask yourself the question, what does this mean, Back to Basics? Then you're missing out on a lot in life.
Yeah. So thank you again, John, and good luck on your upcoming events, and including this book and all the other stuff that you're doing, and hopefully you'll come back, and I'll make sure that you'll get their rewards program next time when you do come in, and I'll be more prepared next time too.
No problem. It's excellent. I look forward to it.
Thank you so much. Thank you. So we spoke with John David Mann, and we talked about the basics of cold fear, the basics of steel fear, and with the basics of how to write a book versus a screenplay. And he's deciding to write a show, a TV show that is, maybe a movie, maybe a TV show. Oh, wait a second. I said that twice again, didn't I? But that's okay. Because you know what? The more and more I say it, the more and more John will say, you know what? We'll have 2 TV shows. So I think that's what it is. And I think that's what he's striving for. As usual, as always, there is a quote from Back to Basics, and I'll tell you the quote, and hopefully John will like that. Why is that when you discover you can't have something, you want it even more? I think that's what John is trying to say, right? He wants more. He wants everything, right? Now, everything in life goes back to basics, and that's what life is all about. And that is what I usually say at the end of the episode, don't I? Now, there are 3 things that this episode and every episode makes a hit for me, which is the content, the guest, and definitely the host. Guys, take care, God bless, and please do comment all my episodes, including this one, because it helps me to understand that you are enjoying these contents that I have here. And guys, take care, God bless, and I will see you next week on Back to Basics. Next week's episode on Back to Basics. So let's talk about you, if you don't mind, before we get into the book. You had a really long journey of what you did back in the time, and then you also were a Grammy Award nominee also. So can you explain who you are and what you are? Because I know who you are. But apparently a lot of people don't. So let's talk about the back in the scenes, if you don't mind.
Sure, I don't mind at all. Actually, I had a parallel life, if you will, parallel tracks going my whole life between